Hello, my name is Struan Garvey and welcome to the Tuesday edition of the State of Scottish Football. It's a very special edition of the State of Scottish Football today. As you can see below, it is transfer deadline day. I'm not quite as good as Jim White at this, but I'm going to give it my best shot. Thankfully though, I'm not alone. I'm joined firstly by David Smith. David, how are you doing?
Good evening, guys. I hope you're well. Good evening, Struan.
And also by Sean McGill. Sean, how are you doing?
I tried to find my yellow tie, Struan, for tonight so I could pull off the Jim White look. I was hoping you'd maybe be my Natalie Sawyer or something like that. Unfortunately, I'm not, but I'll just have to contend with you guys, I guess. But thank you very much for having me.
Do you know, I was tempted to put on a tie on top of just a t-shirt just for a laugh, but I thought it'll maybe look a wee bit too silly. But yeah, we'll get on with the show. Of course, we are live across Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, LinkedIn. I don't know what's left to say. I think I've got them all covered. So there are plenty of ways for you to get involved. And I think we'll just crack straight into this with probably one of the biggest rumours, I think, of the entire season for Scottish football, one of the best players in the league. And the two clubs that he's rumoured to join are a bit iffy for me. It's Ryan Christie, who last night it was reported is very close to joining Bournemouth. Of course, Christie's deal expires in December this year, so Celtic are potentially losing on a free halfway through the season if they don't act quickly about this one. He has previously been linked to Burnley, but it seems at the moment it's going to be Bournemouth who are able to snatch up the striker. Sean, what are your initial thoughts on this deal?
From a Scottish football perspective, I would be very sad to see Ryan Christie go. Just because I think he is, like you said, one of the most talented players in the league, and particularly from what we've seen so far under Ange Postecoglou, it seemed as though he could get the best out of Ryan Christie, that his brand of football, his philosophy might see a return to Ryan Christie, who captivated us all so much prior to that pretty rotten season under Neil Lennon last year. But I think that could be said for a lot of that Celtic team. I think he was pinned with a little bit of undue criticism, Ryan Christie, by quite a lot of supporters. So I think it's a shame. Like I've said it before in these shows where we've been talking about transfer rumours, that my thing with Scottish players going down south is at least make it interesting, at least make it a natural step in their career. Burnley are the one English Premier League club we are kind of like, I don't think I want to see exciting young...
It's Burnley, isn't it?
Yeah, it's Burnley. And it's the style of football they play has been very successful for them, but I just don't think it would best suit Ryan Christie. And then Bournemouth is one where it's more the level that I think is the issue. Should Ryan Christie be playing above the English Championship? But I guess out of the English Championship clubs, a lot of them are struggling for money. It's been a league that's been strapped with cash for quite a long time now, but there's only really a handful who you'd expect to be pushing for those playoff spots this time around. And Bournemouth, under a promising manager such as Scott Parker, you'd expect to be one of those. So for me, I think Celtic should be fighting tooth and nail to keep Ryan Christie, telling him how much they want him in this team. I think he makes that squad better, undoubtedly for me. He makes the league better. And I hope that any potential move for Ryan Christie doesn't affect his career too much, because I want the best Ryan Christie as possible for the Scottish national team. So we'll have to see how this one plays out, but I think it's a big, big loss to Celtic.
David, do you think a player of Christie's quality should perhaps be looking higher in the English Premiership if he is truly set on moving down south? We know how good certain players from Celtic in recent history, like Kieran Tierney and Stuart Armstrong, they've made the step up. And Tierney, for example, a different class to Christie, but he's looked absolutely fantastic at Arsenal. Do you think Christie should perhaps have his heights a bit higher, if that makes sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, you're looking at the Bournemouth team just now, you look at the players they've got in the midfield area especially, and there's nobody there that you could really go and say that they're class or would even be able to cut it in the Scottish Premiership, if I'm being brutally honest, with regards to Bournemouth. Because, I mean, Bournemouth have came down from the Premier League 2 seasons ago, and they're a completely different team to the Eddie Howe side of things. Scott Parker's took over, got some results, but they're currently sitting sixth. And if you look at the Bournemouth team, as far as I'd be concerned, I think they're only a one-man team at this precise moment in time with Dominic Solanke banks in the goals for Bournemouth. But everybody else you look at in that Bournemouth team, there's no any real quality in that team at this precise moment in time. And yeah, it'd be a great addition for Bournemouth. But in my honest opinion, Ryan Christie's a Premier League player. I mean, if you're a great player for Brendan Rodgers or a Rafa Benitez at Everton or Leicester, respectively.
I think definitely. I've always thought that I remember when James Maddison of Leicester was heavily linked to the likes of Arsenal, and I always thought with that number 10 position, I could easily see Christie making that move. And I didn't even think that sounded unrealistic for Christie to go to Leicester, because I thought under Rodgers, he's looked good. He could make that step up. Even a team like Newcastle or Southampton, I thought would have been good. But it's just a bit worrying, isn't it, Bournemouth? Just the threat of staying in the Championship when you could potentially stay on at Celtic, because I think he's looked really good at times under Postecoglou. But we do have our first bit of breaking news on the show today. As we said, anything's going to happen. And about 1 minute after we went live, Georgios Giacoumakis has been confirmed by Celtic, signing from VVV Venlo. That was a Triple V Venlo of the Eredivisie. Sean, how important a signing do you think this is for Celtic?
With Odsonne Edouard out the door, it seems on the brink of a move to Crystal Palace, I think it was really important that Celtic did get in reinforcements up front. How much he'll feature is yet to be seen. Obviously, how he settles. I think Celtic fans were a portion were pretty excited about the arrival of Albinieti, and that's obviously trailed off quite significantly. So we'll have to see how Giacoumakis fits into the team, and especially when Kyogo Furuhashi has been so successful through the middle. And I guess that any calls for Kyogo to play through the middle are going to be exasperated only by the fact that Edouard was so poor and Celtic became a lot better in the Old Firm once Kyogo did go into the middle. So I think you've got to sort of factor that in. But top scorer in the Eredivisie, we spoke about it yesterday. There's some very, very handy players in that league, and he outscored them all. Yes, with some penalties. He might have to contend with not being the team with the ball a bit more, I guess. I'm not sure that Venlo would have been that in the Eredivisie. They might have been countering a little bit more, and it'll have to adapt to a new style of play under a very strict philosophy, like we always say with Ange Postecoglou. But Celtic need goals, and I guess there's no sort of arguing with a 26-goal striker at a very high level. So on paper, it's good. How he fits in, how he suits the style of play, yet to be seen.
Of course, he did get those 26 goals for a team who were relegated, so to be able to do that in a relegation side, I think just sort of adds to the credit of that. But the reason he's coming in is because two strikers have departed Celtic. One of them has been confirmed. We'll get on to him in a minute. But one who seems all but done, I believe he's passed his medical down south, is Odsonne Edouard, who'll be signing for Crystal Palace for a reported 15 million. In my eyes, Edouard was the best player in the Scottish Premiership, at least for a certain period of time. I think he was absolutely excellent. I always felt his ceiling was just above anybody else in the league. What he did, at such a young age as well. He looked such an all-round striker at times for Celtic. Under Rodgers, he was absolutely excellent. I felt he could go on to do great things. And going to Palace, I'm just not as quite excited as I thought it could have been. For a long time, people have tipped him to be that replacement at Leicester for Jamie Vardy. He's been heavily linked with Arsenal as well. Clubs abroad as well. Some teams in France have been linked with him. David, do you think this is a good move for Edouard personally going to Crystal Palace?
I think it is. He'll go into a team that he's not going to walk into, but he'll go into a team that's expected not to go win games of football every week, but he'll be going to a team where he's expected to go and be best of the rest in terms of relegation. So it's a good move from that point of view. But I agree with your point with regards to what you mentioned about Leicester in terms of he looked like the kind of player that's maybe going to be a perfect replacement for Jamie Vardy at Leicester City if he decided to go and make that move. But from Edouard's point of view, he didn't. And I kind of maybe understood the fact that they maybe kind of threw the towel last season, just in the essence of Celtic when they try to go for the 10 and try to go for all these unprecedented achievements that they possibly could have got. It just dwindled at the last stage, and Edouard was a massive part in that. I felt it was a okay season from a Celtic point of view, but massively disappointed at the same time due to the fact that Celtic never got that elusive 10 in the road that they were craving for, especially after doing so well to get in the 9 prior to that. And Edouard was a massive part in that, and it wasn't the best of seasons from the striker. And from a Celtic point of view, I think it's the right move because Celtic have Furuhashi, they've got Giacoumakis, if that's pronounced correctly, and they're two probably perfect replacements for Edouard, and you've probably got 2 for 1, so you've probably got buy one get one free when you think about it to an extent, just in the sense of you've got Furuhashi who likes to get into areas, likes to expose defenders, very quick, whilst Edouard was a lot more he was a lot more all round, but he was also a lot more laid back in terms of his approach towards goal. He wouldn't do the hard work that Furuhashi is doing, but you've also got Giacoumakis. Sorry, I'll get this mixed up now. You've also got Giacoumakis, who has got an aerial presence, and that was one thing that was very much held in high regard by the Dutch clubs are in the Eredivisie last season when he played for VV Venlo. So as much as this is a good move for Edouard, he could have went higher, but I do feel performances last season kind of dwindled his progress towards maybe getting a bigger club such as a Leicester.
Just to jump in on that, Struan, because Odsonne Edouard is a player who I've massively enjoyed watching in Scotland, and I think that I've not got those connections to Celtic. I don't sort of have any opinion either way, but just as in terms of him as a footballer, I really enjoyed him at his best because he was not just a goal scorer, but his link-up play was so enjoyable to watch. I've not seen too many players in my time watching Scottish football who had that level of technical ability, and just the kind of guile that he had in linking up with other players and popping it off and dropping in and all that sort of stuff. I think he did it fantastically well. And at that time, I worried that if he did make the move to a Premier League, it had to be the right type of side, a side that played football. Because if Odsonne Edouard ended up in a sort of lower half Premier League team who didn't knock the ball about, then I think he would really, really struggle. I don't think that's his game. He needs to be involved in these sort of sweeping, fluid moves. That's when he's at his best. And if you'd said to me a year ago, he's going to end up at Crystal Palace, I would have been concerned with Roy Hodgson as a manager there. But it seems as though Patrick Vieira's come in and wants to be crafting something a little bit different. And they've got all these sort of exciting forward players. Wilfried Zaha, we all know, but Eberechi Eze. And you'll remind me the name of the Reading player who has slipped my mind, Struan, who they signed in the summer.
Is it like Elisiu? Something?
Sorry,
he's young player of the year. That's what I remember. I don't remember his name.
I expected better from you, Struan, your Premier League.
Jordan Ayew is another one. There's another one.
Yeah. So there's lots of sort of young attacking players, obviously. They've had a real investment this summer to kind of overhaul the age of that squad. So if they play that type of football, I think Edouard could thrive at Selhurst Park. If not, then it could be a little bit of a slog. But Odsonne Edouard has had the ability for me, from what I've seen throughout the majority of his time in the Scottish Premiership, to make a real impact in the Premier League, at a higher level in the Premier League, like David was alluding to there. So I'm excited to see his career down south, but it's a shame because although it petered out towards the end, it wasn't. I don't think he was putting enough effort in. I don't think his head was entirely in it. When Odsonne Edouard's at his best, I mean, I've been sat at Rugby Park and watched him score goals against my football club, and I've still kind of been like, wow, that is some player. Like, even the frustration of conceding a goal is almost mitigated by the fact that he's got it so beautifully. So a cracking player at his best. And I think it's probably best for both parties. He wanted away from Celtic. He's got to move to a decent Premier League side, and they can now focus on their exciting crop of talent that they have.
Can I just add something? Sorry. With Ryan Christie and Edouard looking like being on the move away from Celtic, there's maybe a question the fact that if they're going to Crystal Palace and Bournemouth respectively, just at the level that Celtic are at this precise minute in time. Because, I mean, had that been 3 or 4 years ago under Brendan Rodgers, you'd have been looking at these players and going, they're going to go to an Everton, they're going to go to Liverpool, they're going to go to a Man United maybe even. It's just questions how Celtic have kind of declined over the last 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, I think definitely. I think as well the contracts are a bit worrying in the sense that it's almost they had to get out of the door for Edouard specifically when, I remember people talking 20, 30 million would have been his price tag a couple of years ago, and now it's, you're getting 15 million this year, otherwise he's on a free next season. And I think that's a really good point that potentially a few years ago, you would never have seen these players go to that caliber of team. No disrespect to Bournemouth or Crystal Palace, but with the regard we hold Celtic and the standard that they're at, you'd think possibly a higher up team, especially when you see Kieran Tierney going to Arsenal and such. But of course, Edouard is going to be leaving 15 million. It's not too bad for Celtic. But another striker who will be leaving, who I don't think Celtic fans will be as fussed about, is Leigh Griffiths, who is signed on a 1-year loan to Dundee. Now, this has confused me a little bit because I believe he's only got 1 year left on his Celtic contract anyway. So I'm not sure if he just becomes a free agent at the end of this one. But David, what are your thoughts on Leigh Griffiths going to Dundee?
I think it's a good move for all parties concerned. I mean, Celtic have clearly suggested that they want Leigh Griffiths out the door at Celtic Park. James McPake's a big fan of Leigh Griffiths, so it's a great move from Dundee Football Club's point of view. I mean, Griffiths has worked under McPake at both Livingston and Hibs when McPake was captain at both of those clubs. I mean, I read just before we came on actually that Griffiths was subject to interest from Hibs, and Hibs actually put in an offer last night. But Griffiths bizarrely enough, or funnily enough, turned Hibs down, which tells you a lot about where Dundee are trying to go as a football club. But as for Leigh Griffiths, this is an opportunity to get Leigh Griffiths back in the scoring charts. I don't think it's the move to try and get Leigh Griffiths back at the Scotland setup. Far from it. I don't think he's at the age of 31 years old, and I don't think we should be speaking about Scotland or Scotland, potential Scotland calls for Leigh Griffiths. But I think from a Dundee Football Club point of view, it's the best move for them, just in the sense that they've got strikers now. I mean, I remember, I'm going to mention Mr. Sean McGill here, because Sean was there as well. We were at Dundee against Borderig at the start of the year, and you looked at Dundee and they were decent in the eye, they were really good in the ball, but they did very little in the striking roles. And then they've signed Jason Cummings, they've signed Paul McMillan, they've signed Luke McCormack from Ayr United, and they've also signed Leigh Griffiths. And that's 4 very exciting attacking options now. And from a Celtic point of view, it's getting rid of dead wood, and that's always a major positive if you're a football club. If a player doesn't feel wanted at a football club, you just want to let them go, and that's what's turned out to be.
Yeah, so you're going to say something there, Sean?
I was just Dale, I'm just wondering if Leigh Griffiths is dead wood at Celtic, why is it a good signing for Dundee? Because when Leigh Griffiths hasn't managed to get himself motivated or fit or firing in Celtic's most important season, arguably in their history, why is he going to do it for Dundee, whose ceiling is what, 7th this season, maybe sneaking into the top 6? What is it about this fresh start for Leigh Griffiths that might see him return to the player who has been so successful previously?
It's an interesting way to look at it, I suppose. I mean, if you remember back a wee while ago now, Leigh Griffiths didn't exactly get the best of spells at Wolves up in England, and then he made the move to Hibs, and Hibs kind of reignited his career again. And that's kind of, I think, where Leigh Griffiths is kind of coming from. I mean, he spoke to Sky Sports today, and he kind of gave an impression that he's not wanting to prove a point, as he always says in his interviews. But this is kind of proving a point again, because you're kind of having to prove a point that you're still at the elite level, and you're not exactly just a striker that's been there and done it.
Yeah, I think it was interesting that he said that they didn't want to. He didn't have to prove the doubters wrong again, but there's a reason why there's been so many doubters. There's a reason why he feels like he has to keep proving himself, because just as soon as Leigh Griffiths gets himself into the good graces again of the supporters of the club he's at, and I guess Scotland fans as well, it seems to go a little bit awry. And I think it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. 2 pretty interesting characters in Leigh Griffiths and Jason Cummings up there. 2 great strikers when they're at their best. But it's just it'll be a test for James McPake and that Dundee squad as a whole to get the best out of both of them, really. But I guess we're talking about Leigh Griffiths because it has been a long time since we've seen him firing at his best. And I just think that when it was so important for Celtic last season, and he played so well in that 3-5-2 and formed that great partnership with Edouard that swept to the league before COVID hit, I just find it very, very strange that he wasn't back at that level. And if it's a fresh start for them, it's a fresh start. But I wouldn't be sold if I was a Dundee fan. I wouldn't think this is a guaranteed great signing for us. I think time will tell, and it's going to be I think they'll have to be patient as well. I don't expect Leigh Griffiths to be on the pitch next week after the international break and scoring goals. I think it's going to take a long time to get him anywhere near the player we once knew.
Well, the thing I find interesting from this, Sean, is Dundee are playing a system where they play one up top. So before Barry Mullen got injured, it was him up top. When Mullen got injured, it was Jason Cummings up top. With Leigh Griffiths coming in, it's going to be loads of questions are going to be raised around now with regards to whether Jason Peake maintains the system. Did they play one up front? Did they go with 2 up front and play Griffiths and Cummings? If they play 2 up top, what does it mean for the midfield of Dundee? Because they've got exciting midfielders at Dundee. They've got Paul McGowan, they've Max Anderson, Charlie Adam, Luke McCowan, Paul McMillan. Sean Byrne, yeah, Jordan McGee even as well, because I mean Jordan McGee's been playing out of position as of late. So there's loads of questions to be raised with regards to this, but also from a Leigh Griffiths point of view, I do honestly feel he needs to hit the ground running early, or else Dundee, not just Dundee fans, but also Scottish football fans in general, will get on to him pretty quickly. And you raised a point, Sean, with regards to football fans, or Dundee fans, beg your pardon, with regards to Griffiths signing. And I've seen Dundee fans on social media moaning about this signing.
Yeah, I think I would. I don't tend to go on social media more about signings, but I think if I was in that camp, I would be a little bit sceptical of this one. And I guess there's a lot of baggage with Leigh Griffiths that the club will hope to sort of shield and just get the best out of on a football pitch. So it's going to be an interesting time, and I think Dundee have made a very good start to life in the Premiership, and I would just hope that there's no sort of disruptions on the way.
I think
sorry.
Oh, no, I think it's really interesting that you're pointing out that Hibs had apparently come in with an offer and he'd rejected it, because a couple of weeks ago, I think it was, or possibly even just a week ago, that whole swap deal with Kevin Nisbet had come about, and I was pretty worried about that, and I just felt it was a wrong move for Griffiths to come back to Hibs. So possibly a team like Dundee is more suited to him. Obviously, he was born in Leith. He's a Hibs fan. It would have been an easy decision for him to go back to Hibs, especially with the striker situation there. So I do find it interesting that he has chosen Dundee. I think that'll definitely be one to keep an eye on this season, as well as you say, the competition that they've got up front. I mean, a Cummings and Griffiths partnership is definitely something that I've envisaged in the past for Hibs, but has never actually come true. And now it's happening at Dundee. It's definitely nothing that I'd have expected to have seen before.
I think the Leigh Griffiths story is a similar situation in Malky Mackay at Ross County. Because of previous circumstances, they've always got a bit of hatred about the move. But Malky Mackay got a brilliant point in Pittodrie on Sunday, maybe quashed a few doubters wrong. Leigh Griffiths could be in a similar vein with regards to that. 1 or 2 goals in the next month or two, and he'll start getting a few followers again. I mean, based on circumstances in the past, you're not going to get the biggest of followers. You're not going to everybody want a selfie with you all the time, but you are going to get 1 or 2 people who will hate the hell out of you based on what you've done, and that's probably going to be the case here with Leigh Griffiths at Dundee, and it would have been the case had he still been a Celtic player this evening as well.
I think on that. Sorry, Shane, I can tell you're keen to keep us going, but it's an interesting topic.
No, I'm
not suggesting you're disregarding this at all, David, but I think it's important when you talk about issues like the public feeling towards the likes of Leigh Griffiths and Malky Mackay is to distinguish between doubters in terms of can they do their job as effectively as they might be supposed to, and the people who have problems with their genuine wrongdoings and misdemeanours. I think there's people who doubt Malky Mackay as a football manager, and there's people who dislike Malky Mackay because of his very public wrongdoings. And I think that there might be some crossover in those two categories, but they are two separate things that you can feel they can coexist with each other while being sort of separate thoughts, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
So sorry, Stuart. On you go.
There was a comment from Ian McIntosh in there saying that I wonder if Strachan's got something to do with it, and that's possibly playing into this. Obviously, he's at Dundee, got a role coming up with Celtic, but that's all speculation. We should probably move on from Griffiths now to the final Celtic player I want to mention today is Felipe Jota, who is arriving from Benfica. I don't think there's too much to this one. He's a talented young winger. I think Celtic could use a bit of creativity, especially if Odsonne Edouard is leaving. Kyogo will probably be playing through the middle a lot more, leaving a gap on the left. Christie is also leaving. A young winger could come in. David, what do you think of this one? Do you think Celtic need this sort of signing?
Yeah, I think so. I think it provides competition as well, because James Forrest looks to be in a position where he'll get games, but it looks as although he needs the competition, that he needs to go push him on as a player. I feel that Celtic are short in the winger areas. They've got I forgot his name. Abada. They've got Abada and they've got Forrest, but I do feel they are short in the winger areas as well. And bringing in Joe would just be a good signing for Celtic, and it would probably complete the jigsaw to an extent for Ange Postecoglou's side.
The attack is looking pretty dangerous, I have to say now. If you look at the strikers, the calibre they're coming in, Kyogo, Abada, Jota on the left, possibly as well. They might play a front two with Giacoumakis. It could be an entirely new front four, and it looks really dangerous. But switching over to the other side of Glasgow here, Rangers haven't really had many incomings today. They've had quite a quiet transfer window, all things considered. Haven't really spent too much, but there are 2 players who look to be leaving, and one of them Cedric Itten, who has never really hit the heights at Rangers. I've always seen him as the 4th choice striker, and outright the 4th choice striker when everybody's fit. I've never thought he was ever going to be considered one of the top players. Obviously, he brings a lot of height to the team. He brings some a different dynamic that the others don't, and quite often we've seen that. But he's going to loan to Griffiths. I really hope I've pronounced that correctly, who were recently promoted from the second division in Germany into the Bundesliga. So for me, I think this is a really interesting loan. Obviously, going to the Bundesliga, it's a massive league, top quality there. Some of the best strikers in world football are part of that league. Of course, your Hollands and Lewandowski's. It'll be a really interesting one for him to fit in. Sean, kind of two questions here split up into one. One, do you think this is a good loan for him? And two, do you ever see him finding a pathway back into the Rangers team?
So on your first point, it's hard to know because the Bundesliga is a very high level, and if Cedric Itten, and this is no disrespect to Rangers, Rangers would beat Greater Freud. I don't know. Sorry, my German's not my best one. But I feel like Rangers are a better side than them. But in terms of the level of the league, if Cedric Itten struggled against some of those sides, he's certainly going to struggle against the teams that he come up against in Germany. So I'm not sure about game time. I'm not sure, obviously, about play style. But I think it was important for him to get out of Rangers if he's chasing game time, because with the addition of Fashion Sakala, he now sort of became fifth choice at Rangers, which was never going to work. My question to some of my Rangers supporting pals was, now with Itten gone, was he the one who gave a little bit of variety to that forward line? He was more of a target man, more of a physical presence up there. Is it a little bit samey in those Rangers forward options? But being told that it was just important to get Itten gone, he wasn't at that level to play for Rangers, they felt, so getting him away was perfectly fine. In terms of getting back to the Rangers side, I don't see it. I think that even with the departures that could happen of sort of Alfredo Morelos, I think that Rangers, always we get mixed up. Rangers will be pursuing other options. I feel like this is the end. It's just a loan was an easier deal at this moment in time, and I suspect we've seen him play his last game at Ibrox.
I think it's
a disappointing conclusion from all parties concerned, if I'm being honest with you. I mean, I felt he had something different to offer still. He's a good option when coming off the bench, in my honest opinion, because, I mean, with regards to if Morelos is having a mediocre game, you've got that different option, that different ability about you in terms of Cedric Itten, and he does offer something different when he comes off the bench, but he's still going for a game time at Ibrox. I can't understand why Rangers have put him out alone. But I think he is a good option when he is off the bench, and he has scored 1 or 2 goals after coming off the bench. So I can see it for both sides, if I'm being honest.
I think it's definitely an interesting one as well. With obviously, you'd expect Defoe nearly pushing 40 at this point. He'd possibly be on the off. Morelos as well. Things seems to be moving every single summer, but doesn't. It'll be the striker situation is definitely one to keep an eye on for Rangers, I think. But on the other end of the pitch, Nikola Katic seems to be getting a loan to. I'm going to butcher this pronunciation, and therefore I apologise in advance to Hajduk Split of the Croatian league. David, do you think this is a big loss for Rangers to lose Katic? Obviously, he didn't play at the weekend. It was 3 centre halves that they actually played in that game, with one of them playing at right back, and they kept Celtic out. Do you think this is going to be a big loss long term, or do you think this is an okay player to let go?
It is a bit of a loss to Rangers, to be honest. Sean, you could correct me here. Did he play for Rangers B a few weeks ago?
Yeah, one of the exciting young Scottish players that were going to get helped by the Colts teams joining the leagues. Yes, Nikola Katic did feature for Rangers B against Dumbarton in the SPFL Trust Trophy.
I thought that, yeah. Which just tells you where Rangers are wanting to go in terms of youth development at this precise moment in time. But on to Katic, you could tell the writing was on the wall for a while now. I mean, to start with, Katic's tenure at Rangers started off very well, but afterwards, you kind of told the writing was on the wall. And when Gerrard started bringing in the likes of Balgan and Goldson's been a mainstay in the Rangers team, and you've also got other players in there as well, you could kind of tell that Katic's days at Rangers were over and done with. I mean, I feel he was a good player, good enough figure for Rangers, but he just found himself looking at ideas just far too soon. Because I mean, the Rangers were very solid at the back last season, and for Rangers to be solid at the back, they needed new additions, and they've got that. And as I said, the writing was on the wall for Katic, and it's time to say bye bye.
I'd agree with that, Struan. I think that I wouldn't say it's actually that big a loss to Rangers, because Goldson's pretty much a guarantee to start every game, and then next to him you have Hollander, then Balogun, and then even Jack Simpson, who came in from Bournemouth last season. So for me, Nikola Katic should probably became fifth choice centre back. When you have too many players who aren't playing, you can get sort of disharmony in the squad. People can get a little bit disgruntled and anxious and all that sort of stuff. He's still a prospect. I think he's only 24 years old, Nikola Katic, and I think that going back to Croatia is maybe a little bit disappointing, and I thought he'd maybe look to, I don't know, make a jump to Belgium or somewhere of a more similar standing to the Scottish Premiership after being at a top club like Rangers. He has good attributes. He's a physical presence. Obviously, can be a threat in the box as well. He scored a goal in Old Firm derby at Celtic Park, but I think that he wasn't quite refined enough at this point in his career to be Rangers starting centre-half, especially when they're now looking to retain their Premiership title. So I think getting rid of him was probably a smart move on Rangers' part. A little bit disappointing for the player in terms of going back to Croatia, but it could be for personal reasons, just wanting to be a little bit more at home, going back to the club where he started his career. So I wouldn't be too concerned from a Rangers perspective. I think their defence is pretty solid.
Briefly as well, Stuart, it was just unfortunate from Katic's point of view that he picked up the injury at the time that he did, because he was doing well prior to that injury. And Rangers have built him up over the summer, but he needs to be playing football after a long time out, and it's just unfortunate for both the football club and from Katic's point of view. I'm led to believe there's a recall clause in the deal, though, so that's a massive for all parties concerned. So if that is indeed true, then it means that Rangers can get some cover defensively if they ever need it.
I think that recall could be really important actually for future, especially if he does hit the ground running. As Sean, as you said, he is only 24. I think he turns 25 later this year. Plenty of years left ahead of him if he does really hit the ground. But Rangers haven't really been too active today on deadline day. It doesn't look like anybody's going to be coming in. There's been rumours of Borna Barisic. He seemed to look quite emotional at the end of the Old Firm, but nothing really seems to have come of that. Josh Doig was tipped by a few. I don't think there were any credible links to that. I think that was mostly just some social media hype, so I don't think there's point in going too much into that. But on Josh Doig, looking at Hibs, we've known for a number of weeks, need 3 or 4 players in numerous positions, and they finally signed a defender. It may not be the one people expected. It's Nathan Wood, who's signed on a 1-year loan from Middlesbrough. The 19-year-old defender is highly thought of. He's worked under Jonathan Woodgate in the past, so pretty decent coach there to help him defensively. Of course, he's been at Stephen Warnock's side, who has been absolutely fantastic. I'm certainly hoping he's got a signed photo of him to bring to the Hibs dressing room. But Sean, what do you think of this signing? Because obviously Hibs have needed a defender. He looks a real prospect, but at the same time, he's a 19-year-old on a season-long loan, and you'd have to imagine he's got high aspirations at Middlesbrough. They've got high aspirations as a club. If they can start pushing towards the Premier League, you wouldn't necessarily want to stay at Hibs if that is the case. Do you think this is what Hibs need for sustainability, or do you think they should have potentially looked at a 27, 28-year-old centre-half as a bit more in the prime of their career, somebody who's going to commit to the club long-term?
Age is a little bit arbitrary, I think, but for me, the fact that we've spoken about it loads on this show, but the primary position that should have been top target for Hibs heading into the transfer window was centre-back. And the fact they've signed a 19-year-old on loan on transfer deadline day shows that they've completely mismanaged that situation. I think it's a really big failure on the part of Jack Ross, Graham Matey, and anyone who is involved in transfers at Hibs, because it's been their Achilles heel for such a long time now. I think there's good attributes in, I was going to say all of their current centre-backs. I'm more inclined to say Ryan Porteous and Paul Hanlon. I'm not sure that Darren McGregor at this stage of his career can offer too much beyond a sort of experienced head. But there is good attributes in Ryan Porteous, but it's mistake after mistake after mistake that's hampered his career so far. Paul Hanlon can be steady, can be solid, but again, it's consistency, and perhaps now we're seeing a little bit of fitness issues that you'd make you concerned. And those two haven't been convincing at all. We've seen Hibs have to change their back three to try and just get more of a defensive presence, and Paul McGinn's tucked inside and become a right centre back. I think they should have been aiming a lot higher. And if we're going to talk about it, but if Jason Kerr's available for £500,000, which is the number reported in him heading to Wigan Athletic, then Hibs should be stumping up that cash. They can afford it, and I think that to get still a relatively young player, a Hibs fan growing up, and a player who's been consistent now in the Scottish Premiership for so long would have been a much more sort of fruitful and long-term and strategic input from Hibs instead of, it's deadline day, we still don't have a centre-back, who can we get on loan from England? I think it's really, really poor. Nathan Wood could be a good player, I don't know much about him. And like you said, he's highly thought of, but he'll be gone in a year if he's any good. That's the thing. I think
that's the point. If he's good, you might as well keep him. That's the sort of sign.
Might as well keep him, and if he's Hibs level, then he might stay. I just think that I'd be massively disappointed if I was a Hibs fan. I don't know how you feel, Struan, but I think that when you can so obviously see that that's the one area of the team that massively needs improved, and it's taken this long to get a youngster on loan, I'd be disappointed.
Yeah, I've made my feelings clear, to be honest. I don't think it's the sign they want. We'll get on to Jason Kerr in just a second there. But another St Johnstone, his partner, Jamie McCart, was linked with Hibs quite a lot as well. The two of them were sort of tossing back and forth between Hibs transfer targets. And apparently it was a 250 grand bid, which was rejected from St Johnstone for Jamie McCart. And when you see Jason Kerr going for double that, you've got to say that was just lowballing from Hibs. And in the end, it almost feels like they couldn't get Jamie McCart a few days ago. Who's available? Nathan Wood. Let's do it. A bit of optimism, of course. He's an England under-20 international. He looks highly thought of from people down south. It is just one of those where you've expected a much, not better signing, but a more long-term sustainable one. But on to Jason Kerr. He seems to be signing for Wigan. I've seen a difference of £500,000 and £600,000 for the fee, both of which are pretty good values of money. Wigan, of course, are in League One in England right now. David, do you think this is a good move for Jason Kerr? Because I feel a lot of people, and I've certainly seen it on social media today, have said he's good enough to play in the English Championship at the very least, if not for one of the top teams in Scotland.
Yeah, well, I noticed Charlton were in for Jason Kerr. They were the club that put in £500,000 for Jason Kerr until Wigan upped it with 600. But I feel he's a championship level player as far as I'm concerned. But from a Wigan Athletic point of view, it'd be a brilliant move for Wigan, because Wigan have had their troubles, haven't had their troubles since league over the years with administration troubles, and the fact that they'll get to League One. But this would be a fantastic move for Wigan. You've got a double cup winning captain. But from a St Johnstone point of view, I feel they've marketed this very wrong, and I'll explain why. I do honestly feel that because Jason Kerr won the Scottish Cup twice with St Johnstone last season, that St Johnstone should be getting a far higher valuation than they're getting. Had Jason Kerr been a Celtic or Rangers player, you'd be looking at this and going, let's get £1 million or £2 million or £3 million for this type of player. St Johnstone, in my honest opinion, haven't exactly evaluated this very well. And you're speaking about a player here that's masterminded a double cup success, a player that's played pretty much every game for St Johnstone last season, a player that is in Scotland contention moving forward. And I also do feel that, as much as it's a good move for Jason Kerr, I do feel that St Johnstone have got this one wrong financially.
I think that's definitely an interesting point. We see how talented he is. He's only 24. It's sort of that age when centre-halves can often break into big teams, that sort of mid-20s, and he's been absolutely excellent. And I think the leadership as well is really important. I wonder how that's going to affect St Johnstone, obviously losing their club captain after everything they've been through. I think that'll be a massive loss. And I don't know, from our point of view, we're going to discuss the Scotland national side later, but I've seen so many people for the past 12 months calling for Jason Kerr specifically from that St Johnstone team to be in the Scotland squad. Obviously, we've had our issues with centre-halves to the point where we're playing left-backs and midfielders at centre-half for the national team. And Jason Kerr's once again missed out. So I wonder if he's thinking if he can do well down south, if that's going to be the leapfrog to get him into the national team. But moving away from the Scottish Premiership, one Scottish centre-back... Can I ask
something on Jason Kerr? Is that all right?
Yeah, that's no problem. Go for it.
Yeah, I would agree with David. I think that the fee is a little bit disappointed from a Saints perspective. Obviously, you can only sell for what the market value is, but I would have liked to see it be a little bit higher. I do agree. And I think that it's a massive missed opportunity. We know, Aberdeen have got Declan Gallagher in and now David Bates, but if they were willing to spend £500,000 on Martin Boyle, then why not £500,000 on Jason Kerr? Just really bolster that team. And Hibs have said, I think that's a mistake. And maybe even Celtic or Rangers will live to regret it. The thing with me with Jason Kerr that people don't talk about is his technical ability, his passing. He's one of the best passers out from the back. Certainly out with the Old Firm, probably the best in my opinion in a defensive sense. Yeah. He'll ping those balls. He'll send them. He'll break the lines in a way that you wouldn't expect a St Johnstone centre half to do typically. And I think that it'll be a massive attribute to Wigan are one of those sides who kind of have been yo-yoing between between League One and the Championship, and they'll look to be at the top end of League One this season. And for a title-winning team who have those aspirations, I think that makes sense to have a player who can break those lines, who can send you a lovely diagonal. And it's what we're crying out for Scotland in the right centre-back role. It's why Jack Hendry was drafted in, but I think Jason Kerr could do that job very well. So I would have liked to have seen him in the Championship. I hope that Wigan can get up quickly and he can be a big part of that, because I think he's a cracking player, and I hope that this is the start of the next stage in a very successful career. It's already been very successful. He's got two cups to his name. And captain at such a young age, it's a massive achievement. It shows a little bit of his personality. So hopefully big things to come for Jason Kerr.
I think we need to move on from Jason Kerr, because you're making me really jealous that Hibs haven't signed him, and I'm now imagining what that could have been like had he come and not Nathan Wood. But you never know. Nathan Wood might become Harry Maguire's partner for England in a few years' time. It's all up in the air. But you mentioned Jack Hendry there, who of course left Celtic permanently in the summer for Odsonne in Belgium. He's linked with Club Brugge, who are of course the Belgian champions. They're in a Champions League group of death, basically. They're playing Man City, PSG, and RB Leipzig. So good luck to them, really. What do you make of this move potentially, Sean? Because Jack Hendry, as we've seen at Celtic, he didn't quite hit the heights that a lot of people expected from him. He was the up-and-coming young Scottish centre-half at one point. He's done really well in Belgium. He's got that call into the Scotland national team. Didn't have the best of Euros, but he's looked good at times in that team. As you say, he's not bad with the ball at his feet as well. Do you think a move to Club Brugge is what he sort of deserved?
If you had told me 2 years ago, Struan, that Jack Hendry would be getting bought for 10 million euros, I'd have told you to have a long, hard look at yourself and grow up, is what I would have said to you, Struan. Because
that's a height joke. That's not very nice.
Yeah, exactly. It's just, you're a very, very small man. No, I saw those numbers this morning. I'm like, Jack Hendry? Because he did struggle in Scotland. I remember at Rugby Park, I'm going to bring it like mentioning this one. Killie beat Celtic 2-1. Both of the goals were Jack Hendry's fault. A Stuart Finlay late winner from a corner sent Rugby Park well that day. And then at that point, I was like, he's going to struggle to stay in the Celtic team, which would prove true. And he kind of slipped away from there. And he had his sort of loan spells in Australia and those sorts of things. But all credit to him for going and taking a risk in Belgium at Ostend and really looking to sort of put himself out of his comfort zone, because it's paid dividends for him. And Club Brugge are obviously one of the biggest clubs in that country, and Champions League team, like you said. I was going to say mouth-watering ties coming up, perhaps from a financial perspective, but not if you're a defender and some of those players you could come up against, none more so than the front three of Kylian Mbappe, Neymar and Lionel Messi. Good luck with that, Jack Hendry. That could be a very interesting watch indeed. But credit to him for getting a move like that. The reports are that he's staying behind to get this move done before he meets up with the Scotland squad in Copenhagen ahead of tomorrow's World Cup qualifier against Denmark. And it could be a big move for him, obviously, Champions League club. If he does well there, then who knows what the next step is for Jack Hendry. I hope he's not been brought in as a squad player. You know, we see it here that if he's performed well for Ostend, Club Brugge, or I guess people don't come from. I'm not saying they're the same size of club, but I guess they're an equivalent in Belgium of a team like Celtic and Rangers. And I think that you see that happening here. Sometimes the best players from smaller clubs are just sort of like stockpiled and they never really managed to break through. I hope that's not the case for Jack Hendry, because he's proved a lot of doubters wrong, me included, and I hope it stays that way.
I think what's really interesting is the fact that he's got experience in the Belgian league. You know, I think about somebody like David Bates, who of course went to Hamburg and it never really worked out, but he'd never played in German football before. He'd only had Scottish football. So from Club Brugge's point of view, they've played against him. You know, they know how he plays firsthand. And I feel he has the ability to be one of Scotland's best centre-halves, as you said, if he can break into that Club Brugge team and be a regular player in it. He's going to be getting Champions League football, which no other Scotland centre-half off the top of my head can say they're getting that. I mean, McTominay has it, but he's not really playing centre-half for his club. So I think this could be absolutely massive. David, what do you think? Do you think this is potentially one of the most significant transfers in the window from a Scottish point of view?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think what Celtic should have done before they let him go was put him out of loan with the option to recall. Because I mean, I think Celtic, as a club, due to conclusions at the time when they thought, we looked at Jack Hendry and thought, he's not going to be good enough. Well, he's proved people wrong. And the fact that I think it was Aston Villa were interested in him just speaks volumes of how he's came back from the flesh and came back and done very well for himself. And I mean, the Belgian league's a good standard. It's a good environment to be involved in, but it's also the type of league where you're involved in and go and say, well, if you can go and put in, if you can go and do well or go and do okay, then you're probably going to go and do well and get yourself back in the shop window. The Belgian League's perfect in terms of getting yourself in the shop window to the extent that Premier League clubs and Club Brugge have came in for him. And I mean, the Champions League's the perfect experience for Jack Hendry because I mean, Sean alluded to the Kilmarnock scenario there. And if you're struggling against a team of Kilmarnock's calibre, with all due respect, despite the fact that Steve Clarke's teams were always good with Kilmarnock, it just shows that Jack Hendry wasn't at the time very bit a Celtic player. But what Jack Hendry has done is he's matured as a top Scottish defender. And the fact that he was in a Scotland squad for the Euros just tells you everything you need to know. Because, I mean, Steve Clarke, it would be very easy for Clarke to just leave Hendry out the squad. But Hendry fitted very well into Clarke's system. And he had an okay Euros. And that kind of helped in the Belgian season. And it's helped towards his moves. And I might be wrong here, but I'm pretty sure I've seen Jack Hendry and Clark's the Bakers a few weeks ago prior to the Dundee Hibs game. So I don't know if that was the same Jack Hendry or not. But
what was he getting?
It was actually 10:15 in the morning, Sean. So he was getting one of these the bacon cheese turnover things.
Interesting choice. I like that. He's a man of class, Jack Hendry.
I'm a steak bake man myself. I can't go wrong with a steak bake. But yeah, if he had gone to Hibs, just thinking he was in for Dundee Hibs, that would have been a fantastic centre half signing. With that sort of fee, really, really blows Hibs out of the water there for sure. Anyway, but I think for me personally, I'd sort of forgotten about Jack Hendry after he left Celtic, and I thought that Östersunds loan was possibly just one of these where he would just sort of disappear across Europe and I wouldn't really hear from him for a while. But a fair credit to him because he's done fantastically well. I think Östersunds have done well as well. I believe they made his transfer permanent for around 4 million, and if they're going to sell him for around 9-10, instant profit in the same summer. You know, I think they've done really well with that one. So yeah, it's not a good business for Celtic at all, to be honest, given the defensive issues that they have at the moment, to see how well Jack Hendry's doing. But yeah, I wish Jack Hendry all the best. Turning back to the Scottish Premiership, one of the teams who I think they're probably the most happy fans in the country at the moment are Hearts, and one of the most happy players, just from watching his interviews, is Cammy Devlin. Sean, what do you make of this transfer? He's a midfielder coming over from Australia. I think Hearts have had quite a good transfer window. It's not been the busiest by any stretch of the imagination, but we've seen Benny Benningham come in from Everton on loan. He's looked really good. Ben Woodburn from the other side of Liverpool. He's looked really good for Liverpool. Don't know how he's going to quite work out in Hearts, but it's a really exciting signing. What do you make of Cammy Devlin? Because Hearts fans are buzzing about this signing.
They are, and I think it's because of the people who know more about the Australian League than me commenting on it. I think they think that Cammy Devlin's a very good player, and I know that Joel Sked from Review from the Terrace and Scotsman, places like that, has done a deep dive on Cammy Devlin, and he was very impressed by him. He was trying not to get too excited as a Hearts fan himself because of some of the comparisons he was drawing. And I think that from what I've seen on social media, obviously I know quite a lot of Hearts fans as well, that they're pretty happy with this window. Perhaps more attacking options at wing-back was something that they would have been looking for. Obviously, Michael Smith's been on the right, and Andy Halliday or Stephen Kingsley, Alex Cochrane have been featured on the left. So they looked for something a little bit more threatening, but that being said, they're very happy with a lot of the business that has been done. And Cammy Devlin seems to be just another welcome addition to that, another Australian in Scottish football, a real link that's been growing. I was talking to Dylan McGowan of Kilmarnock about that today in an interview that will be coming out very soon. And he was talking about Cammy Devlin in very high regard himself. So I think it will be interesting to see how he does. And he seems to be very excited about this move. And I think that Hearts have a way of doing that because they very quickly, the social media response and the stadium and the atmosphere very quickly tells you just how big a club Hearts are and just how, and especially in the exciting time that they're in with fan ownership. I think that if Cammy Devlin can hit the ground running, then he'll endear himself very, very quickly to those Jambo supporters, because that's what they're like. If you perform, if you give your all, they'll back you 100%. So exciting times to be a Jambo with them joint top of the league.
I'm not sure if there's some kind of Hearts following in Australia, but I remember when Jamie McLaren had signed for Hibs, he'd made the point that all of his family were Hearts supporters, and I found that really interesting that an Australian where footballer was so passionate about Hearts. Of course, Bozanic, another one coming in, so I think it'll definitely be an interesting one. David, have you got any thoughts on the Cammy Devlin transfer?
It's a good move for Hearts. I mean, Hearts have been really good in terms of recruiting, differently in terms of they are recruiting players from home, but they're also recruiting players very well from abroad and indeed England. I mean, Armin Julie and Josh Ginnelly have been terrific additions for Hearts. And excuse me, Cammy Devlin is decent and fits Hearts' philosophy with regards to the way they want to play. And before I let you go into the next question, I'd just like to tell you that Celtic Rangers have put in late bids for Ali McCann.
Have they really?
Oh,
Wow.
We'll take that one right now. Sean, Ali McCann to Celtic or Rangers. Obviously, he's good enough to play for them. I don't think anybody could debate that. How big of a signing do you think that could be for either side, especially if somebody like Christie is departing Celtic, sort of the way we've seen him play a little bit deeper?
Yeah, I'm a bit caught off guard at that because
that's what deadline day is all about.
Yeah, it is what deadline day is all about. Yeah, certainly. I think he would be. I'm not meant to call you out too much, David. I have just had a wee Google search, and I think that might be a parody page. I think it might be one of those. Have you been caught out?
Oh, I have. Sorry.
You've sent the Celtic and Rangers fans watching this stream into orbit with a potential sign of a very exciting young 21-year-old. It turns out you've been duped. So I guess I won't comment on that too much because it looks like he will be staying in fair.
Do you know what though? It's one of those where you don't question it at all because he's good enough to play for either of them.
Yeah, he's good enough. Yeah, right.
Easily could. I wish he was Scottish. Honestly, every single time I remember he plays for Northern Ireland, it just upsets me a little bit more. But we'll round off with Hearts on John Souttar, who appears to be staying. Of course, he's had terrible injury issues in the past. He's never been able to get going. Knee problem after knee problem. And there's been 2 bids apparently from the English Championship that Hearts have knocked back. Sean, how important do you think he is to this Hearts team? Obviously, you'd imagine the money is pretty significant coming from the English Championship for a player of John Souttar's quality, age, profile, and everything like that. A lot of people believe that he should be in the Scotland team already. How important do you think that Hearts have convinced this project to him for him to stay? I don't even think he'd kick up a fuss, to be honest. I think he definitely wants to stay with Hearts. And B, just how important he is to their team.
Yeah, so on your first point, I think that it's the good spirit around Hearts at the moment, especially as I said with the handover yesterday. I mean, I was reading Energy Sports Hearts correspondent Jamie McIntosh write about this. He was at the press conference yesterday, and Anne Budge was talking about how it was her mission to get Hearts financially stable before this handover happened, and she's confident she's done that Hearts are in a safe place financially. So I imagine these bids aren't too pressing. It's not as if Hearts are cash strapped at the moment. And I also think that John Souttar will have quite a lot of goodwill to the football club itself for sticking by him through all these injuries, for always giving him the best possible rehab. I think he has been rushed back a little bit on a couple of occasions, but I guess that feeds into the second point that he's very important to that team. That's why he's been rushed back, because he is such a talented player. I honestly think if John Souttar had stayed fit, he'd be Scotland's number 1 starting centre half, and he would be, if not at one of the old firm, bossing it in the Premier League or high-end Championship. I think he has that level of talent. When he was coming through at Dundee United and then Hearts, the sky was the limit for that boy. He was in that fantastic Dundee United team that should have really won the Scottish Cup that season, had so much talent in it, and then got the move to Hearts, which was a real coup at the time for the Edinburgh club. And then it's just a shame that injuries have hampered him, but even you can see it from the start of this season that John Souttar is massively important to this Hearts side. They have struggled defensively at points, especially last season. That even though they were the best team in the Championship, they didn't always have real faith in their backline, and John Souttar just improves them immensely. So I would expect Hearts to keep knocking back those bids as long as they possibly can, because a Hearts team with John Souttar in it is definitely a better one. And Scottish football with John Souttar in it, a fit John Souttar is better for it as well.
Well, we're going to move on to the Scotland national team, to which many people think John Souttar could be a part of. But before we get there, I'm going to give each of you a chance. If there's any transfers we haven't mentioned so far that you think are definitely significant, interesting ones to come this season, who you think they may be. David, is there anyone who you think, any transfer that's caught your eye, really?
The one for me is, and this is a definite, by the way, just to clarify, is Jamie Robson joining Lincoln City from Dundee United. I mean, that's a good move for the youngster. I mean, I watched Jamie Robson for Dundee United against Rangers, and he was impressive in that game. Got man of the match performance and scored a winning goal to ensure Thomas Court's side won 1-0. And that's a good move for the youngster. Because I mean, Lincoln City in the Championship, it's a good standard of the Championship. We all know that, and Lincoln City is a club in the rise, so I think it's a good move. And looking to be coming in the opposite direction is Scott McMahon from Hamilton, and Scott McMahon showed that he can compete in the Premiership, and that's a good move for the youngster as well. The player. Sorry, I don't think he's a youngster. But it's a good move for the player, making a move across to the City of Discovery from Hamilton.
I've not actually seen that one. That's really interesting, going to Lincoln City. Obviously, the goal against Rangers was significant. I've got a Rangers pal who actually likes Lincoln City, so that'll definitely be an interesting one for him to take there.
I know him.
Do you? Sean, has there been a transfer that's caught your eye, in or out of Scotland?
I'm sticking with Scotland, and one of Europe's best young prospects has joined Tommy Wright's project at Ayrshire, as Leigh Dempster once coined him. Ollie Shaw became Kilmarnock's new number 9 earlier this afternoon, and I was a little bit sceptical because I guess Ollie Shaw has had that kind of label as being a really promising young player, a little bit too far from his chief executive at the time when she said that he's one of the best young prospects in Europe. I think we've seen that was a little bit of an over-exaggeration, but his minutes to goals ratio is actually pretty good. He's scored a fair amount of goals considering that he's came off the bench a lot of times. He's never been the starting striker wherever he's ended up. For me, I want Tommy Wright to build a team that is still capable of doing well, surviving in the Premiership next season. And this might give Ollie Shaw a little bit of time to bed in, score some goals. I still worry about how we get the ball to him, but now I think with Ollie Shaw, Scott Robinson, Innes Cameron, and one to come in, perhaps Jamie Gullen, perhaps Callum Hendry, there's plenty of striking options there for Kilmarnock and no real excuse not to win the league.
I think that's definitely an interesting one to see. Ollie Shaw and Jamie Gullen, of course. I know both of them from the time at Hibs. Jamie Gullen's still at Hibs. He's a player I rate highly, and I think that'd be a really good loan for him to go to a club the size of Kilmarnock in the Championship, going for promotion. So definitely one to keep an eye on as well, Jamie Gullen. But of course, as you said, Ollie Shaw was confirmed earlier on today, and hopefully he can hit the heights as well that Leigh Dempster certainly expects from him. But we'll finish on the Scotland national team now. When the 26-man squad was announced, there were a few omissions that caught a few people by surprise. Of course, Scott McTominay being one of them. He's having surgery on an issue. Ryan Gauld not getting a call up. But since that squad has been announced, there's now confirmed 7 players are going to be out for our opening tie against Denmark tomorrow. Now, 3 players are out with injury. Those are Armstrong, Greg Taylor, and James Forrest. Of course, we saw Taylor and Forrest miss the Old Firm at the weekend. And 4 players are out with COVID, which are John McGinn, Nathan Patterson, Stephen O'Donnell, and Kevin Nisbet apparently is unsure whether his is a fitness issue or a COVID. I saw on the website today it seemed to be in the COVID category, but other people have reported fitness. But either way, we don't have a right back anymore. Our first choice right back, Stephen O'Donnell, is gone. Our backup in Nathan Patterson is gone, and our right wing back option in James Forrest is gone. David, how big of an issue do you think that could be for the Scotland national team in that point specifically? Because even when all 3 of those players are fit, it's probably one of the weakest points in the team regardless.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the big question from Steve Clarke's point of view with regards to the right back is, do you go with the elusive play Tierney and Robertson in each area? No idea. There's going to be a lot of questions tomorrow night before the team lines come out. But yeah, from a Scotland point of view, it's frustrating to lose Kevin Nisbet, but not just on a Scotland front, it's frustrating on a Hibs front as well, because I mean, he's been doing really well with Hibs. And Kevin Nisbet has kind of picked up injuries at the right time because he's had interest from Celtic. He's had various offers from other clubs, but it's also frustrating at the same time because I mean, you've been looking at this as an opportunity to get his mindset on getting the Scotland squad and staying in that Scotland squad. It's just frustrating from Kevin Nisbet's point of view that he can't stay there. As from the right back point of view, very frustrating because you've got Stephen O'Donnell. And Stephen O'Donnell's not everybody's answer, but he suits Steve Clarke's philosophy, and that's a major positive from a Scotland point of view. Stephen O'Donnell could be looked at and analysed in two specific ways. It could be analysed in terms of the performance he put in against England at Wembley, where he was absolutely phenomenal that night and put in a man-of-the-match performance for a solid 0-0 draw at Wembley. But he could also be used as a narrative to the performance he put in against Croatia, I think it was, where he was very poor that night. And ultimately, he'll be judged on performances in the big games.
Stu, I want to jump in just before you wrap up, so we're not in the way of the Scream of Celica boys at 7 o'clock. But I'd just say that for me, I think that it could be a chance for Ryan Fraser to play right wing back. He did that, I believe, against the Faroe Islands. Big step up to do it against a very competent side in Denmark, Euro semi-finalists. So I'd be a little bit worried about it. Maybe Tierney is the option, but I would suspect Ryan Fraser plays at right wing back. And but I'm on the Scotland tomorrow night because it's my last time on, so hopefully they win.
Definitely. Well, we will be live tomorrow for the pre-match, halftime analysis and full-time reaction to the Scotland result. And yes, the full-time reaction shall be a victory because regardless of whether we have a right back or not, we're Scotland and we'll beat Denmark. I'd like to thank David and Sean for joining me tonight. I've really enjoyed Transfer Deadline. Be sure to just keep an eye on the deadline day signings. They're always going. And Scream of Celica will be following us right after we end here. So don't go anywhere. Maybe for a cup of tea and to check if Jack Hendry has been confirmed. But we'll catch you next time.